Welcome to the Understanding Boys podcast. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is recorded, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. We pay respects to leaders past, present and emerging. The Understanding Boys podcast is a series of conversations exploring what it is to be a good man these days. So if you had a story about being a good man and that you could tell a 14-year-old boy and he'd actually listen, what would that story be? And that's really what I'm asking our guests today. I'm Dr. Ray Swan, and we're a community of teachers and parents concerned with the education and growth of boys in the modern world. The series is brought to you by Brighton Grammar, an all-boys school in Melbourne. To learn more about the podcast, please visit understandingboys.com.au. In today's podcast, we speak with Nathan Lovett-Murray. Nathan's probably best known as a former professional AFL player, having played 145 games with the Essendon Football Club. But since his retirement, his career has taken on many twists and turns. In 2008, he founded an Indigenous hip-hop record label, Payback Records, and where he mentors young Indigenous rappers. More recently, he's been working with Nicky Winmar on a documentary called Point and Be Proud, The Ripple Effect, that uses a story of how Nicky Winmar, in response to racial abuse, lifted his jumper and pointed at his skin at Victoria Park in April 1993. Currently, Nathan works as a mentor. He has lots of stories about mentoring, mentors that he's known, and also how non-Indigenous people can start to find ways into understanding Indigenous culture and what we have to learn. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. So Nathan Lovett-Murray, thanks for joining us on the Understanding Boys podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, great to hear.
I thought a good place to start for us today would be, I was seeing on the news stream that you've been working on a movie, and you seem to be a man of many talents, actually, because obviously we'll talk a bit about your football career and being an athlete, but, music and creativity and mentoring, there's a lot of different things that you do. But tell us a bit about this documentary with Nicky Winmar, Point and Be Proud, The Ripple Effect.
Yeah, it's an idea that I came up with from my time when I played football at Essendon Bombers, and I was there for 10 years. And then at that time, Michael Long, he was like a mentor figure. And at the time, he started the long walk because he'd been retired for a few years now. And yeah, he started the long walk. And so I was able to, do a part of that walk, on my days off from footy training. And then, after that walk was finished, he was able to set up the Long Walk Trust, and I was able to get involved on the board. And then from that, I became an ambassador for one of the educational programs that we set up there, and it was called Walk the Talk. And it was a schools program that was set up to go into schools and to teach the students about Michael Long's walk, but also about other Indigenous leaders. And so from that concept, I started working at St Kilda 12 months ago as the Indigenous liaison officer. And I went to the CEO, Matt Pinnis, at the time, and sort of spoke to him about the idea about, being able to, talk about Nicky Winmar's story, because, it was such a significant moment for him, pointing up, lifting his jumper up and pointing at his skin and standing up to racism. And, something like that at that time, was unheard of. And so I felt like it was, such an important moment. And, my time at St Kilda, there wasn't any Indigenous programs that were going at the time. So, I thought that, we could, replicate a similar program. And the program idea was to tell Nicky's story, and then, be able to take that into schools and be able to, talk about racism and how that, and also, linking that to mental health, because at the time, the last few years, mental health has become such a big issue, and then, we understand and what it can lead to. And I think also seeing what Adam Goodes went through as well a few years ago, in his last year of football, that the mental health, side of things, really sort of came from that as well. Being able to link, the racism and mental health, and just from my own experiences of going through mental health and how that impacted on my mental health, and not really understanding it, but being able to teach other people about it, and raising more awareness, through Nicky's story, and it's not going to just be Nicky's story; it's going to be other Indigenous and multicultural athletes that have gone through racism and how that impacted on their mental health as well.
And for our listeners who may not be AFL fans, as you and I are, of course, talking about Nicky Winmar, champion footballer, amazing athlete, subject to racism at Victoria Park, who famously lifted his Guernsey up and pointed to his skin as a statement of who he was. And, that's been made into, a statue and clearly a defining moment, and hopefully a pivotal moment in the evolution of, understanding the impact of racism, on Indigenous people and where it sits in Australia more broadly. I know, Nathan, as well, you've been involved in a reconciliation action plan at St Kilda. Can you tell us a little bit about what a reconciliation action plan actually is?
I've been involved in a couple. I was involved with Essendon when they were the first sporting club to launch one, and then I was there when St Kilda launched their RAP, and also now being involved with Brighton Grammar. And I guess it's a document that acknowledges the wanting to make that change in that I guess work environment, and look at how we can do things better in that Indigenous space, and how we can raise more awareness. How can we learn from Indigenous culture and Indigenous people? And that's something that I could see with the reconciliation action plans. It's so important. And I guess my time working at Brighton Grammar as an Indigenous mentor, and I guess the networks and the contacts that I've been able to bring to the school of other Indigenous people with Indigenous knowledge. It's the school's been very open about that, and that's been one of the great things to see in organisations that are open to work with other Indigenous people.
Tell us a bit, Nathan, just going back a little bit earlier in your life, and you've spoken about a mentor like Michael Long, and I'm sure you had a number of powerful mentors, and that's something that you're really becoming in the community. Growing up in country Victoria, I mean, what was that like in terms of your own identity and knowing who you were? And I know that there were some really profound kind of moments for you in sort of opening up about your own identity as a young man growing up in country Victoria.
Yeah, I guess growing up I grew up in Hayward. I was born there, and with mum, and she had 4 kids to my dad, and my dad he lived in Melbourne, and we lived in the country, and I think growing up in the country, you got it's open doors, and so you're outdoors a lot more, and I was a lot more involved with sport. I had my mum's brothers, my uncles, and they were very passionate about their sport, and I guess that was something that from a young age I got involved in. Cricket, football, basketball, and so I was always busy with sport. I guess growing up, and but then I think growing up, and you do see some of the negative, I guess, influences, and I guess you do see people that you don't want to be like, and you see people that you do want to be like more, and you tend to be around those people more so, and you want to try and learn, but I think having because I had my uncles that I wanted to be like more, and I was able to I guess not get distracted and not I guess go off the wrong path. And I think because of my sporting talent, I was able to focus a lot more in that, probably more so than my education, I think. But I think my sport was probably what kept my education going, and I was able to finish my year 12 in Hayward, which was a pretty sort of high achievement for myself and my family at that time. And I was also playing elite under-18 football with North Ballarat Rebels, so Hayward to Ballarat was a 3-hour drive, so we used to have to travel to Ballarat twice a week for football training and to play a game of football. And I was probably lucky that I had great family support to be able to help me get to football training, but also help manage my education as well. And when I hit the age of 18 and I put my name into the national draft to get drafted into the AFL, I didn't get drafted, but then I made the decision to move to Melbourne to follow my dream of being an AFL footballer. And I did that, and I ended up getting picked up by Collingwood on the rookie list and spent a year there. I got delisted, and then 2 years later I ended up at Essendon, and I ended up at Essendon on the Michael Long scholarship. And I remember I was in Hayward, and then I got a phone call from Michael Long, and he offered me the Michael Long scholarship. And so from that role, with that scholarship, I was able to play with Bendigo Bombers, which was Essendon's reserve team at the time, and then from there I got drafted to Essendon. And I remember when I first went down to Essendon and meeting Kevin Sheedy for the first time, and because I had that year at Collingwood, he said, not many people get a second chance, and make the most of the opportunity, and so or that was something that always stuck to me, about just making the most of my opportunity with the Bombers, and then I remember starting at Essendon and having Dean Rowley, who had been at the club for a few years, and he was like a big brother mentor for me, and he really sort of showed me the way of being an AFL footballer, not just on field but off field as well, and I felt that was really important at the time. I just turned 21, and I was still, I guess, finding myself, and having someone like Dino, it really helped with my football career and my development as a person off field as well. And I think 2 or 3 years later, Dino retired, and at that time, I think we had 8 Indigenous players at the club, and I was one of the older ones, and so there was 3 younger boys that had just been drafted: Paddy Ryder, Courtney Dempsey, and I think Leroy Jetta, and and I was playing a mentoring role to those guys, a big brother sort of figure, and from there I sort of always understood that, and really wanted to be a good role model for those young guys coming through the AFL system, and it was something that I was always passionate about. Working in community was always working with young people, and I guess trying to be a good role model for them, and I guess showing them and trying to inspire them to be able to follow their dreams as well. I come from the country, and I was able to I guess reach my dreams of playing AFL football, and that was a message that I was really passionate about trying to pass on to other younger Indigenous people.
So you're talking about the role of your mum and your dad in your career, and you're talking about mentors, and again, just conscious of our listeners, listening in, and they're thinking about raising their boys and working with young men. I mean, just in listening to you, it strikes me that you're obviously pretty driven. It was a real goal of yours, and you needed to make sacrifices, and you made those. But can you think of any advice or any even ways of being that some of those people that they actually brought to you? Was it a quality that they had, or was it an opportunity? Or you talked about being there for the long drive, and there were no podcasts back then. So what was it about those good people in your life? What did they do that helped you?
Yeah, I think with my uncles and even my mum, they was always like community-driven people. It was always about looking after the community, looking after the mob, looking after your family, and that was something that I reckon has been really strong with myself, and being able to work in community and help other people, and even when I was playing at Essendon, I was an elite athlete, sports person, and I still had other interests, and I still did stuff outside of football, and I guess that came from Kevin Sheedy as well. I remember with Kevin Sheedy, he coached Essendon for 26 years, and I always wondered how he was able to coach for so long, and he had other interests outside of football. It wasn't just all about football, and so for myself, playing at Essendon, I was able to do a certificate in fitness training, so I was a qualified fitness trainer, and on my days off, I would go and teach fitness training at the Juvenile Justice Centre with young guys in Parkville, and also I used to work at an Aboriginal school and teach young Aboriginal kids fitness training, and then from there I was able to set up my own Indigenous music record label, Payback Records, and it was about giving young Indigenous people a voice through hip hop music and being able to create opportunities. And then my work at Essendon Football Club, I was very passionate about working in the Indigenous community, so I was able to travel all around the country working in Aboriginal remote communities, but also in communities in Victoria as well. So, that was something, that I learnt from a young age, just about, I guess, giving back and helping your community and working in that space. But probably the main thing, I reckon, was just having a hard work ethic, and that was something, I learnt from an early age, what you put in is what you get out. And that was the same with how I took my football. The harder I worked, the more rewards I would get from that hard work as well.
With the transition coming out of being an elite athlete, it's often said that it's a really difficult time, when your career comes to an end, and you've made so many sacrifices, to play at that level, the impact on your body and, the injuries that you sustain, whether you're lucky or, you're unlucky in that space. Do you think your connection to your community that helped sort of make that transition easier, or was it a really hard time for you?
It was definitely hard. Like I I'd planned that, when I retired from football, I was going to go into my full-time record label. I was going to work into that full-time, and that was the plan, but it didn't go the way I wanted it, and that sort of finished up. And then I remember, making the decision to move back home to Hayward, and and that made the transition a little bit easier. Being able to move back home and have that family support. But then I was sort of stuck in a situation, not sure what I wanted to do. And then I remember playing local football down Hayward. I was an assistant coach, and then just really being, I guess, passionate about coaching. And then I made the decision that what I wanted to do was get back into the AFL system and get back in and have a crack at coaching at the elite level. And so once I made that decision that that's what I wanted to do, and I made the decision to move back to Melbourne, and I ended up getting a coaching opportunity up in Shepparton, and I was coaching an Aboriginal football team, Wamba-Wamba, and then through that I got a job working at an Aboriginal school as a youth worker, and then I did that for a couple of years, and then I made the decision that I wanted to get back to Melbourne and have a crack at working at an AFL club. And an opportunity came about with St Kilda, where I was able to do a coaching placement, but then also having that experience of working at that school as a youth worker, and really enjoying, I guess, being involved in Indigenous education, and now having that opportunity now with Brighton Grammar. It's something that I'm really enjoy doing. So I'm pretty lucky where I'm working in two spaces with at a football club and also at a private school, which is like I'm really enjoying and learning so much, which will help, I guess, my coaching development as well.
You were saying earlier, Nathan, about some of the challenges that you'd experienced, in your health and in your mental health, and obviously you can't do all the things that you've done, whether it's in music or travel or community or sport, and not have learnt a few lessons about how to manage your own mental health. What advice would you give to parents or guardians of young boys and adolescent boys about how to help them manage their mental health?
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of going through that with my son. I've got a 12-year-old son who lives with me full time, and he's also going to school. And how do I, for myself, it's always been easy. Like, I know that anytime I'm going through a stressful time, I go back home to Hayward. I go out bush. I connect to country. That's something that's always been important, and I've been able to learn that at an early stage. That's what's best for my mental health, and just being able to go home and I guess be around family, but most of all just being out on country and just connecting to culture, and that's something that's always been good for my mental health. And I guess trying to work out what's best for my son, and I've taken him back home a few times, and he loves being out on country. We went back there the last school holidays, and was able to go out on Lake Conda and go fishing for eels and stuff like that, and just being able to walk around the lake. And that's something that he really enjoyed, and also being around family. I think that's something that that's really important for myself, and I guess best thing for my mental health as well.
With your work that you're doing in at St Kilda and in schools, and in building reconciliation action plans and truth telling, one of the things that seems to be coming up a lot for people at the moment is just about ways of knowing things, and how much non-Indigenous people have to learn from Indigenous people in terms of ways of knowing it and ways of understanding, and also ways of learning, that there can be different ways of learning things. Are you able to, perhaps for our non-Indigenous listeners, help them to understand a little bit about what that might mean?
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I've always found, since I've moved to Melbourne. Where I come from, Hayward, we've got a long history of I can take you to stone huts and steel traps that are over 6,000-7,000 years old, older than the pyramids. And that's knowledge I've always grown up with. As a kid, we used to go out there camping, and we knew of these spots. And we've also got spots where massacres were, of Aboriginal people being slaughtered and murdered. And we grew up with those stories as well. The good and the bad. And it's something that when I first moved to Melbourne and I share my knowledge and people just, they don't have a clue, they don't understand. And, about, there's probably a perception that all Aboriginal people live up north, but it's not. Victoria has a strong Aboriginal culture, and it's still continuing, it's still thriving today. And, and that's a message that I'm always sort of, I guess, getting across, something that I'm proud of and proud to be able to teach and educate, non-Indigenous people about my culture and, the Victorian Indigenous culture, because it's so strong. And, down here, it's something that, I guess the message to non-Indigenous people is, I guess get involved, find out who the traditional owners are, learn about the culture, Aboriginal culture, because I guess Aboriginal culture is your culture too. If you call yourself an Australian of this country, then you've got to know the true history of this country. And that's what it is, there's mitten sites just outside of Warrnambool that they've been studying for the last 10 years that go back 120,000 years. That's how long our Aboriginal culture has been here for. And, it's something to be proud of, and obviously there was, things that happened in the past that we're not proud of, but you have to have an understanding. And that's what truth telling is about, understanding the good, also understanding, the bad that's happened in the past, but how does that stuff that's happened in the past still affects people today, and that's the truth. And that's what's happened. And it's great to see more people, wanting to talk and want to learn about this stuff. And, there are organisations Aboriginal organisations out there that, do want to help and teach people about, Aboriginal culture.
That's fantastic, Nathan. And if I was a parent listening to you, one of the questions I would have is, where do I start? And, you've talked about, some organisations, and we can include some more resources as part of this podcast. But, I mean, do you have any good advice or good places for people to start, for non-Indigenous people listening, thinking, I really need to make sure that my kids really are, part of a generation that are really aware and, really trying to connect into other ways of knowing and truth-telling and actually moving, reconciliation and so on. Where would they start?
Well, I think, your first starting point is acknowledging the traditional owners, like who are the traditional owners of where you live, and find that information out. And then my advice from there is, what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about education? Are you passionate about health, sport, welfare, whatever that passion is, there's an Indigenous organisation in that area. So, you just, you can Google all that sort of stuff. And, there's the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service, there's the Aboriginal Advancement League, there's so many Indigenous organisations, in the relevant field. So, just being able to, you can Google all of them, but, find out, what is it that you're passionate about, and, where can you support, Indigenous people.
I'm going to take you back to, just your work again and working with young men in particular. And, you've given some great advice about, mental health and, how to connect in. I'd just be curious to hear from you, Nathan, what being a mentor has taught you, because, I know I'm a teacher and, the kids are always teaching me things. But what are some of the young people that you've worked with, what have they taught you about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I reckon, from working with the young people, what I learn from them and get from them is just having fun. I think sometimes, we can get sort of too caught up in our day-to-day work and we can go away from the little things and just, I guess, enjoying each other's company and having fun and having a laugh. That's something that I just, I love going to work, whether it's at the St Kilda Football Club or Brighton Grammar, and I get around the group of boys that I work with, and we just have a laugh. That's something that you just don't ever, I guess, forget that. That's what we're here for. We're here to enjoy our time, while we're here, and really just get around those good people, and don't forget to laugh and smile.
What is it to be a good man these days?
To be a good man, I believe, it's about just wanting to do better and be better as a person. I think we can never stop learning, and we can never stop improving. And that's probably something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I guess with the COVID stuff that's been going on a lot lately, I reckon the first lockdown that we went down, I probably wasted that opportunity about trying to better myself. And this time around, really looking to learn more and be a better person. And that's something that I'm really sort of focusing on.
What do you think drives you, Nathan?
What drives me, I guess, knowing who my family is. I come from a really strong, proud family on both sides of my mum and my dad. It's something that is I guess a constant reminder to always wanting to be the best version of myself. Because of my family background, and that's something that probably drives me the most.
And my final question for you is, if you had a story that you could tell a boy, say, of 14, and he'd listen, what would the story be?
I think the story, it's about what Kevin Sheedy said to me, about just not many people get a second chance, and just really making the most of your opportunities. And that's something that a lot of people, we get so many opportunities, and just about making the most of those opportunities that come your way, in whatever way it is, whether it's education, sport, family, just making the most of those opportunities is probably the main message that I'd like to get across.
Nathan Lovett-Murray, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. You are just such an inspirational person in the community for the work that you do, the care that you show, the example that you set in so many different ways. I'm just so grateful for your time today, and I wish you health and safety over the next little while during the lockdown here in Melbourne. So stay safe, and thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Understanding Boys podcast. Make sure you subscribe on your podcast app, and please leave us a review to help grow the community. For more information about the podcast, visit understandingboys.com.au. Until next time, thanks for listening.